Well, this is the village of Appomattox, or Appomattox Courthouse. There's a space between the court and the house, which indicates that it's not the courthouse, but rather it's the place where the courthouse was in this particular case. And it's nothing but a small village, and it's not a whole lot changed since 1865. Some buildings have been burnt down. The McLean house over here, which is where the surrender occurred, was kind of taken apart. About 9 out of 10 bricks in it were removed for souvenirs. Almost all the furniture was removed. I don't know how Mr. McLean felt about the whole thing, but anyway, there's kind of a sadness to all of this. Maybe not sadness, but melancholy. When the surrender was over, which was about 3 p.m. in the afternoon on April 9th, 1865, when the surrender was finished, the Union band playing "It Would Be Over the Hill" from right about there began to play "Auld Lang Syne," and some of the Union troops began to cheer. And Grant comes out from the McLean home there, goes over to the soldiers and tells them to stop it, that the Southerners were now our fellow citizens once again. And as Grant says, they had fought with great bravery for one of the most terrible causes one can fight for, but nevertheless they were now our fellow citizens. The rebels were now our fellow citizens. They were no longer rebels. They had accepted paroles, very much like a modern day parole. So long as you don't do anything wrong, you're free, and the U.S. government will not intervene and make your life miserable. So as a result, the 22,000, 23,000 soldiers, with the exception of the highest officers of the Confederate Army, the Army of the Northern Virginia, with the exception of them, the soldiers are free to go, so long as they kept their printed passes with them, and the passes are printed up there in the building you can see right there. That's a tavern, and that's where they set up the printing presses to print out the parole passes that people could carry with them back home. And of course, some people had to travel all the way back to Texas. Some men had to travel all the way back to Texas. You end up with 700,000 dead soldiers. You end up with 2 million dead, injured, diseased, otherwise troubled soldiers and citizens out of a population of 31 million. In World War II, we end up with about 440,000 dead soldiers out of a population of 150 million. So that gives you a sense of just how intense the flame was that finally was extinguished here at the McLean home in Appomattox. Certainly, as Robert E. Lee told his soldiers, if you are as good a citizens as you are soldiers, you will do well. And it was, I suppose, Oliver Wendell Holmes caught the essence of the thing. Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, who fought and was wounded several times in combat. Oliver Wendell Holmes said, "Our hearts were touched by fire, and now the fire goes out." And as Andy Rooney, the CBS commentator of long ago, one time said, that you will never again experience what you felt during wartime so deeply, so passionately, despite all the terror and fear of war. Nevertheless, wartime is a singular event in the life of a person. Maybe not a good singular event, but it's something that sticks with you and gives you a whole new way of looking at things. I think the world was ready. I think the United States was ready for peace. I think that people like John Wilkes Booth were not. And of course, this is all going to end in tragedy, the tragedy of Reconstruction, and then the tragedy of Jim Crow thereafter. 1/4 of the country will simply remain behind. When I was growing up, right there, those are slave shacks right there, that white house, the white building on the left is a slave shack. When I was growing up back in the 1950s and 1960s, there were still people living in slave shacks because the South was so poor and intentionally so backwards that people did not, very low chance for economic growth. And somebody who did become economically successful could end up in a great deal of trouble. Well, not everything works out, but the ending of slavery and the ending of this terrible, terrible conflict, the terrible swift sword of combat, was certainly worth it.